So we're on a renewed beginning here in the Coaching Life podcast. This is our renewed beginning, our fresh start, our COVID start, right?
Yep.
Our
reopen.
back to normal. I refuse to say new normal. We're back to normal, right? But it is new because I think you and I are going to talk remotely for a while because you don't even work on campus anymore.
Yeah, probably not until the beginning of the year.
So it's okay to use. I mean, it's new normal for now. So that's what that is.
This is the reopening.
There you go.
The Coaching Life reopening. I think we should talk about one of the most ridiculous things in baseball.
Not having fans in the stands?
Well, no.
Okay.
I got to keep this non-controversial.
Okay.
60-yard dash.
Oh, yeah. You texted me about that yesterday. I don't know what your beef is with that.
I think it's stupid. I hate it.
See, here's why. What he's talking about, if you happen to not know, is that since the history at this game, So Alexander Cartwright actually said that if you want to make my team, you got to be able to run the 60-yard. I'm teasing. The inventor of baseball didn't say that. But, for as long as, I'm 47 years old. And when I was in high school, I went to showcase camps and things. And even when I was in college, one of the first things we did was we ran a 60-yard dash. And the reason why is because it's the same measurable that coaches and scouts have been using for years and years and years to determine foot speed, to determine that acceleration, that ability to run. 60 yards is basically the distance between home plate and second base. Granted, it's a straight line, but the measurable, I can tell you right now, I can ask a kid off the street, hey, if you run a 60-yard dash, yeah, how fast do you run it? If he says 7.5, I'm like, okay, that's not bad for a high school player. It's not fast, but it's above average probably for where people are. Most guys are around 7.6, I'd say, in high school or above. But if you want to play in college, you got to get that down, unless you're a pitcher or even a catcher, or maybe a first baseman that can rake. But if you want to play in the outfield or even the infield, you better get that down around 7.2. And if someone says, hey, I run a 6.8 60, I say, one, you're lying, or two, let's go out to a field and let's measure it. Because a 6.8, listen, there were days when scouts picked up players and signed them to a contract based solely on a 60-yard dash. And I can give you a player's name who I know this happened with. A player by the name of Bobby Bonilla.
Really?
Bobby Bonilla had a big athletic body, and he shocked people because he ran that 60-yard dash, and it was like 6'9", 6'8", something like that. And he had a really good arm as well, but he had never played much baseball at all. But he was strong and fast, and they said, we can make this guy. He's athletic. It's the first measurable that you can see, the first tangible that you can see if somebody's athletic or not is watching them run.
Yeah.
And then the second one is watching them throw. So the two most basic fundamental, skills to show how athletic a person is to watch them run and throw.
Sure, but I don't think you need to run 60 yards to make a prediction on how well someone can run. And let me ask you this: you have two players, and let's say one runs a 60-yard dash a little bit faster than another. Is it possible that the slower 60-yard dash runner can run to second base faster than the person that runs a 60-yard dash faster than them?
Well, I suppose it's possible.
Well, I would say it is.
Obviously, if he understands how to take a rounded path, right? He doesn't decelerate as he's going around the bases. The fastest way to get around the bases is to run in a circle, as opposed to running straight and then bowing out like a lot of people teach.
So you use the word decelerate there. Mm-hmm. Some people are able to get up to their top speed quicker than others. Some people, it takes a long time to get there. So if you take the person that's running the 60-yard dash, if you break their runs up into 30 yards, they may be slower than someone else in those two 30-yard sprints. than the 60-yard sprint.
So they're just hitting singles all the time.
Well, no,
as opposed to the guy.
But
you're
restarting. Well, you're restarting because you're decelerating as you round into first. So you
shouldn't be.
You're getting top speed. You got to a little bit. You can't. I mean, you can't run in a circle as fast as you can run a straight line.
You can't, but you can run the same speed. If you're running a proper path around the bases, you should not slow down at all.
I don't. That's interesting that you'd say that. So.
I mean, granted, I think a person could run faster in a straight line.
Right, but okay. So, but when a batter goes towards first base on a double, they angle out off the first baseline. All right, so they're running in a straight line for the first 60 feet.
I don't teach it that way. I would
really.
I'd rather.
Let's talk about
I would rather see them go if they know it's if they know it's a base hit. If they know if they know the ball's in the outfield, if you know for sure the ball's in the outfield, you ought to come out of that box immediately, running in a circle, running like you're going to second base. So, which means you're coming out of the box, running directly toward the first base dugout, in essence.
All right, that's a good stuff there. Okay, well, let's say this: why do you do that?
So that they don't have to slow down.
Okay, and so that when you round first base, you're looking right at second base.
It is impossible. Right? Yeah, it is. And you don't have to slow down. There's a lot of reasons why. Visually, you can see the ball better. You don't have to slow down. It is impossible to run in a straight line. Remember how when you were a kid, we all probably learned how to run bases this way. They put the cone out there about halfway down the line. They said, okay, when you get to this point, you bow out so that you can round the bag.
Yeah.
How on earth can you do that as fast as you can? You can't do it. It's a dumb thing, really, if you think about it.
True, and but I don't think you can run in a circle as fast as you can run in a straight line either.
You can't, but I guarantee you this: you can run in a circle faster than you can do that bull crap.
You're probably right. That's good.
I know it's true. I mean, the science is there.
I've taught it.
Trust the science, my friend.
Well, just because I don't agree with that, don't mean I don't trust science.
There you go.
And
I agree
what
with that statement.
What I'm saying is, once you hit first base, you're running in a straight line to second, unless you're anticipating going to third. So you're running faster from first base to second base than you were to first base, because going to first base, you're running in a arc. You're not running straight to it. I say all that.
Hey man, always anticipate the extra base.
True, but I say all that all the way to get back to the fact that a 60-yard dash is not going to tell you, if you take two players and run a 60-yard dash, the fastest player isn't necessarily going to get to second base the quickest. It's strictly
that's true, but you're not. I mean, you're talking about the 60-yard dash being strictly being done to determine how fast a person can get to second base. And it's so much bigger than that. I mean, it's just a flat out measurable across the board for foot speed. If everybody in the game of baseball today decided, hey, we're going to scrap the 60 and we're going to make it a 40, like football does, right? Why does football use 40? It's an arbitrary number, right?
Well, because you could actually have a 40-yard run in football.
Well, sure, a 40-yard straight run is very unlikely. No.
Well, no, it's a lot more common than a 60-yard run of baseball.
If you break it, then it certainly is.
Well,
okay, I get it.
Breaks a lot
I can concede that. Yeah, it could be. It is definitely a lot more common. But the point isn't necessarily say measuring his 60 and then saying, well, that means he's going to be able to get to second base in 6.9 seconds. It just means he runs it in 6.9. The guy beside him, another guy who was here yesterday at our showcase ran it in a 7.2. Maybe one day we'll put these guys beside each other and we'll see how that measures up. But you know how to compare these players now. You know how that player who runs it, if you measure all your kids tonight in practice in the 60, you can tell them how they measure up with the pros. Because you can look all this data up on the internet and say, hey, here's what Derek Jeter ran it in.
Yeah.
Here's this. This is what Suarez runs it in today. This is what Joe Burrow runs it. I mean, Joe's a football guy, so he's probably running the 40s, but
makes a lot more sense for him. I just say my point is you can run. If you ran a 30-yard dash, it'd make a lot more sense for baseball.
Yeah, and
we gotta adapt.
And I do that.
We've done it for 100 years.
If I'm just measuring my team, that's all we do. In fact, it's not all we do. If I'm just measuring my team, I time them going from home to first, and then I time them going from home to second in the base path. If I'm just measuring guys on my team like that. And honestly, I guess I should say this too. The last couple of tryouts that I've run for, say, a travel team, I did that as well. We didn't do a straight line 60. But I think the reason the straight line 60 is there is because it's been so common that when you hear those numbers, you get an idea of how fast a guy is. If I lined up a bunch of baseball players today and said, how fast do you run a 60? They probably would all know the answer. And if he told me I run it in an 8.2, then I know this kid's slower than molasses, right? But I couldn't necessarily say that about a 30. Not yet. If all of baseball started using the 30 for the next 10 years, then I would become more comfortable with that. But I think it's just one of those traditions that has stuck because it's so easy to determine how fast a kid is just when you hear that number. Just raw speed. Not necessarily how fast you can get to second, but just raw speed.
Raw, unrelated, non-functional speed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess. Let me ask you this.
It's baseball's Wonderlic test.
Okay. I'll buy that, I guess. Yeah. What do you teach your runners, say, on first base, ground ball through the shortstop third base side?
That 5.5 hole.
Yeah. What are they? Or do you teach them to round second as they go there, or what do you teach them to do that? Because in that case, they're when that ball's hit, they're running in a straight line. Obviously,
my cue is chest to ball. Point your chest to the ball. That way, you know that you're facing the ball, you're seeing the ball, and the reason I say that is because our players know that it's your decision. If you know that if that guy's coming up and his shoulders are squared towards second base and he's coming up with the ball hard like he's going to throw it to you, you probably should not round that bag, right? There's no reason to round the bag because he's throwing the ball to second base and that's where you are. If you round the bag, you're out. If he comes up, if he hasn't fielded it yet, you round that bag. If he boots it, it's just up. I mean, it's just instinct at that point. I guess, Pat, what I should say, I should back up and say this. I always teach my base runners to make the defense stop you. You cannot be an aggressive base runner if you are content with the base that you're going to. You always want that extra base. And so it's the defense's job to stop you. I want our base runners always thinking about getting that extra base. And so it's like, we say hitting is controlled violence. Mm-hmm. It's like cautious aggressiveness, I mean, or I should say this way, it's being aggressive but smart. It's smart aggressiveness because it's one thing to round everything hard, right? But if you're reckless and you do that, you're going to get backpicked. And that's, in your scenario here, if a guy's reckless thinking he's got to stop me going to I'm going to third no matter what, and he rounds second base and that guy comes up throwing hard and all of a sudden I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And so you gotta be realistic. The probability here, the percentages and the probability is he's going to field that ball cleanly. He's going to get it in. And this is the best base that I can get at this point. But sometimes that probability is different. I mean, sometimes the ball gets through his legs a little bit, or he kicks it towards center field, or he comes up and he overthrows it. And if you're already in motion, then you can take advantage of that.
Yeah, and it's real hard for that third base coach to make that decision, isn't it?
Well, the third base coach shouldn't be making the decision.
Who owns that decision, Coach?
It's always the athlete. It's always the runner.
Right.
The runner should see if the ball's in front of the runner, he or she should always see the ball, and that way they can react according to their knowledge of the game, their read of the play, and their own athleticism. I mean, that's just the way it's got to be. I know what you're saying. I mean, you're saying we micromanage the game as coaches. We tell kids to listen to us, look at us. Yeah. They should only be looking at you. I mean, if you take that scenario and you reverse it and you say a ground ball was hit in the 3.5, so now the ground ball runners on first base, ground ball's hit through the 3.5, so it's a base hit to right. Now, as that player is run before he gets to second base, and as he's about to round second base, his eyes should already be on that third base coach, because it's the third base coach's job then to be able to say, round it but hold, the throw's not coming in yet, round it and then find the ball, turn and find the ball, or on the bag, hands up, on the bag, because that right fielder's coming in, throwing hard to second base, and you can't see the ball coming in, and you need to know to stay on the bag, right?
Right.
If that ball gets through the right fielder's legs, the runner ought to be able to look at coach and see the coach waving him on, and he ought to be able to round that bag without stopping, without slowing down. And so basically, the third base coach is only there in that moment, I think, to be the eyes of the base runner when the base runner's eyes can't see the ball.
Yeah.
When it's not feasible, because you don't want your runners turning around. That's going to slow them down again, right? You don't want them turning around to see where the ball is. So if you need to be their eyes, be their eyes.
But they're probably making a determination once that ball gets by them too on first base of where they think that they're going to be going. So they may think, okay, that ball's hit right to the right fielder. I'm not playing around it. But even so, as they go in, they're looking at the third base coach, who at that point might be pulling them to third, and then they are rounding the bag hard.
Yeah, a lot of kids don't learn that and we don't practice this enough. A lot of kids don't learn to be able to run with your eyes up. As you're running to second base, your eyes need to be over toward the third base coach if that ball is behind you. I don't think so if the ball's in front of you. I think your eyes need to be on the ball.
Right.
As you run to that bag.
Absolutely. Yep. We worked on that the other night actually in 10U practice.
Oh, good deal. So you got to practice that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. What about
what is this? Just question answer day or what?
Yeah.
Are we just not going to do our topic? This is our topic, I guess.
This is ownership.
Okay. Oh, okay.
The players have to own their base running decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what are we doing as coaches to allow that? I think is a big thing that you need to think about. Are we nurturing ownership out of our players, or are we taking it from them?
Yeah, as coaches, it's got to be delegation, right? We delegate. We feel like we're the authority on when a kid should leave a base, advance a base, stay on a base, and we've got to delegate that. We've got to relinquish that from our role as much. I mean, I should say we need to relinquish that completely, unless a kid needs your eyes. That's really it.
You're more of a traffic light, right?
You are. You're the backup camera. You're the backup camera in their vehicle, which is their body.
Yes.
You can see what's behind them, and they can't see that.
They still have to hit the brake or the gas pedal.
Mm-hmm.
It's their decision to do that. You're just there to help them along.
You got to communicate it, and you got to communicate it early.
Yeah. What about pitch calling? I think a lot of coaches struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do you stop calling pitches for your teams? Or what point do you start? Because there's a little bit of complex nature to this, really. Because at some point, college ball, things like that.
One pitch could be your job, right?
Exactly.
It could cost you your job.
Point, yes.
Yeah, I know that's why college coaches like to take ownership of the pitch calling.
Right.
I fall on the side of wanting to put that in the kids' hands. And and I think you got to understand the circumstances as well. I mean, if very, very little ball that's being played in our youth and high school circles, like especially in the summertime, is being played to win championships that everyone's going to remember. Like even travel ball, let's be honest, no one remembers your record or what championships you won. Travel ball is there to get kids better, to get them to hopefully make it to another level. I mean, summer ball is all the same way, unless you're looking at, I guess it is different from American Legion ball, I would say, where the championship may be remembered a little bit more than others and celebrated, because it's a community thing. It's not a put together a team from a bunch of kids. But anyway, the point I'm making is our goal is to try to help kids get better in all aspects of the game and improve and advance in their knowledge and understanding and in their feel of the game as well. And I think this is one area that as coaches, we've got to give this part of the game back to the kids. I think we've got to, this summer, for example, I coached a high school team. I coached a team that had some varsity level players on it, very few varsity level players on it, and then mostly JV level players, kids that have aspirations to be on the varsity team. I mean, they're young, so they're mostly JV players. And I didn't call a single pitch all summer.
Nice.
And I even had young catchers, that were I shouldn't say a single pitch. There were times when I got the catcher's attention and said, "Hey, let's go with this." And then I made sure that after I did that in between innings, we talked about why I did that. And we, I said, "Hey, why do you think I asked for that pitch?" But other than that, all I did was I talked with our catchers and our pitchers. I told them, I want you guys to call the game, and you got to work together as a team, because I told the pitcher, I said, I want you to trust your catcher 99% of the time. Let that catcher call what he believes is the best pitch in this scenario. There may be a time when you're not feeling a certain pitch and you want to shake him off. You've got 1%. You've got a little window to do that. But I really want you to understand the importance of trusting your catcher, because that's really the catcher's job. It's one of the ways the catcher serves a pitcher. The pitcher doesn't have to worry too much about what to throw. But there are some pitchers who like to call the game more. I mean, I know that I was one of those guys. I knew what pitch I was feeling and what one I wasn't. I had a little curveball that had a 12-6 curveball, then one that would go away from the hitter a little bit more. And some days that one that went away from the hitter, I just could not. I could not get myself to throw it for a strike, and so there were days when he'd want that, when I'd be like, no, I'd shake that off, and he'd go back to the other one, and I understand that there are pitchers that want more control, and I think that's okay. I think it's okay for them to do that. But if you see them out there shaking them off constantly, then you got to ask yourself, why are these two guys not on the same page? And I think that communication, and working with your pitchers and catchers to understand that they are a battery, they work together to make this thing run that we call our defense. That they get it all started. And I just think that I think that when we remove pitch calling from the kids, from the players, I think they disengage from the game too much, and I really think it's detrimental. I think a pitcher and a catcher disengages too much. They become a little robotic, and they're not thinking as much about why a certain pitch is being thrown. They're certainly not learning as much about the game. I mean, if you put this in the hands of your catchers and you teach them why you're throwing, why you back up, why you stack pitches in a certain way. If he starts a kid off with this pitch, here's 99% of the time what you probably want to do next, unless he does this with it. Let's say he pulls it really hard down the line. Well, in that case, we want to do this, and sometimes you do the opposite because that hitter understands that hitter that's up to bat, he's a catcher also, and he's a pitcher also. I mean, it's a chess game, right? And sometimes you make the right call, sometimes you make the wrong one. And here's the thing. Coaches do it too. I mean,
absolutely. Right.
So coaches will call a pitch and it gets hit over the fence for a 3-run homer, and the catcher might have called it, but I get really irritated when I hear coaches will call a pitch and it gets hit over the fence, and the coach will turn to you and say, "That's not what I called. I called that. That was supposed to be low and outside." Like, okay, coach. Let's have a little talk here about ownership, right? Right? And I think, what? Here's a good way to keep that from happening. Let your kids call the pitches. Let them call them, and then when that happens, you can talk to them. You could ask, "Hey, what do we call right there?" Well, I called a fastball up and in, but he got it out over the plate. Okay, he just missed a spot. That happens. So, but you called the right pitch, catcher. That was the right pitch, and you let them know, that, hey, sometimes that's going to happen.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times we've talked about it on the podcast a little bit, and we've known some players that have went and gone and played at the collegiate level, and for whatever reason, I mean, there's a bunch of reasons that that players stop playing the sport that they go to play in college. But one of the reasons is it's the commitment level, and they're kind of taken off guard of what it's going to take to not even just excel at that level, but just to stay with the team, just to hang out. And I feel like that part of the reason that a lot of our kids face that experience is because it's an ownership issue, and they don't understand that at some point in life, right? There's an element of the of what you do that you have to do for certain reasons, and it's not just about having fun anymore, and that's kind of a complex transition away from baseball, because obviously baseball or softball or football or whatever you're playing is fun, and it should be fun. But I guess what I'm saying is eventually our players have to be able to make the decision for themselves how much they're going to work, and how much they're going to commit to the sport that they love to play. And I think base running, you're always listening to the base coach. Coaches calling pitches, all the time. I think that those are just small examples of ways that we kind of slowly strip, or at least not help develop that ownership mentality or ownership attribute for our athletes.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of what you're saying is that there's a ripple effect that occurs positively and negatively, and the more those little things, those little nuanced parts of the game that we can put into their hands, the more they learn the important concept of taking ownership, right? I mean, because what happens when a kid gets thrown out at third base when you're waving them on, when it's a sort of an unspoken rule on your team that they're supposed to look at you for advancing bases, and you wave them on, and that kid gets thrown out at third base, what inevitably does that kid say when he comes into the dugout? He told me to go, right?
Right.
What's mom and dad saying over there in the stands? Oh, Coach, why'd you send him? Right? Why'd you send him? And what's happening there is we're looking for somebody to blame. That is not me.
Yeah.
We're looking for somebody to blame who is not me, because, well, he told me to go, right? Well, Coach, you called that pitch. Yeah, the pitcher throws it right down the middle. A guy knocks it out of the park. Well, he called it. Not my fault. Dude, you're the one out there pitching, right? Yeah, take ownership of it. It is your fault. But no, I'm not. And so you're just setting up these scenarios where they don't have to take ownership of anything because you're doing it all for them. You're telling them that, well, you do what I say. Well, if they do what you say and it doesn't work out, they're going to blame you. And then you're going to get mad at them blaming you because they're the one playing the game. And it just doesn't do anybody any good. We need, if your goal is to help people to take ownership, to take responsibility, to own every aspect of the game, then we got to give more of the game to them.
Yes. Well, we got to think about it a different way. We've talked about maybe what I would call a result-oriented approach, where we're thinking too much about statistics, and we're thinking too much about how well someone produced in a given game. You have players that go 0 for 3 in a game, and they're angry. They're upset about how they played. They're upset that they weren't able to hit the ball as well as they were. That maybe they made a couple errors, or maybe they didn't pitch well, and they walk off the field upset, and that's fine. But the question is, what are you going to do at that point? As an athlete, what are you going to do with that anger, with that frustration? Are you just going to put it away and then hope you do better in the next game? That's not ownership, right?
Right.
I guess I'd say you don't want to get angry about the results unless you're focusing on the process that brought you to those results.
Yeah.
I don't think we talk about that enough enough as coaches, you know, especially at the recreational level. You know, you get out there, you have 6 practices, and then you start playing about 20 games, and then you call it a season. It's not an environment that really helps to develop that ownership type of approach to the game, because don't just complain, right? Don't just make excuses, right? I've heard this before. I feel like I read it in a book, but or blame. Figure out what you're going to do to get better.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't, was it our last episode? We talked about player surveys. A lot of players sit down with those surveys and they struggle.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh man, I don't want to do this. I actually handed some surveys out to my players last night at practice, my 14U players, and they're,
cool.
Immediately they're kind of hedging, because they're coming up with excuses like, oh well, what if I struggle at all? Because one of the questions on is, what positions do you struggle at? Mm-hmm. What if I struggle at all positions? Or, then they had excuses like, well, I don't write very well, so you're not going to be able to read my writing. Immediately, I handed this sheet, and
text it to me, son. Text it.
Yeah, a lot of them are evaluating it, and immediately they're thinking, man, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the type of barriers that we're talking about we need to get through, because that's a little bit, that's a lack of ownership.
Yeah, it is. And it's a team killer. I mean, you talked about, you read it in the book. I'll go ahead and I'll take ownership of this. One of the things I wrote about in coaching life is there are certain things that kill teams, and then what we have to do is, if we recognize that we've got those elements on our team, we've got to replace those things with things that build a team. And that point that we're on right now today is, while blaming is a team killer, not taking any responsibility for things, but looking for somebody else to blame for whenever our team fails, or also even blaming someone when everyone else might look at what happened and say, yeah, you know what, it really was that guy's fault. I mean, he didn't hit the spot. Well, here's the thing. He may not have hit the spot, but is it possible that he hasn't thrown enough bullpens to be able to learn how to hit that spot? And maybe that's why his command isn't very good, because we stick him out there to pitch in games, but we never practice pitching ever. Yeah. Right. I mean, again, taking ownership isn't just about saying the words. It's about really, truly saying, hey, you know what? If that's my fault, it's my fault that he can't hit those spots. I got to work with him more, right? It's that ball went through that shortstop's legs, and they scored the game-winning run, and everybody looks at it and we're like, man, there's really no one else to blame with that last play, but he just let it get through his legs. But a real leader will say, you know what, that's on me.
Absolutely,
we haven't given him enough ground balls, and even kids on the team will take ownership and say, you know what. We together as a unit, as a team, we were not in the game enough to make him hungry, to make that player want to come up and make that play. It's all our fault. It's not. So while blaming is going to always kill a team, the opposite of blaming is that idea of taking responsibility, taking ownership for things. Both the things that are directly related to you, so your own failures and your own mistakes, but also just taking ownership of all of it. You're right. I mean, Jocko Willink calls it extreme ownership, taking extreme ownership, which is basically what we're talking about. It's like, I'm not the one that made that play. It was our shortstop. But you know what? If we're a team, it is on us. It's on all of us to get better.
I think people would find, that concept might be a little odd to them, as they're listening to this, and you might think you get into this habit of just admitting failure. Well, that's my bad. But really, the ownership is about the process and about evaluating and thinking, what should we have done better and what can we do better. Mm-hmm. And I think if anyone is out there listening, if we haven't lost all of our listeners from our long break. One of the greatest examples of this that I've ever heard or experienced is the story of Dakota Myers. Oh, and how he I couldn't do it justice to even explain, the situation, but essentially, he had, he's a Marine, he's a United States Marine, and he had some people in his group that were within a battle zone, I guess you would say, and he had to make the decision, sole decision, without the support of cover and without the support of anyone else to drive into gunfire and to drive into basically the enemy's nest and try to save these people. And he did it. And
it was an impossible mission.
He could not succeed.
Yeah.
And I get goosebumps when I think about it, but I've got goosebumps right now. When he says that when he, it's his fault that, his brothers didn't come out of that, place that he was going into. And, he says, when I sat down with the therapist or, someone like that, and the first thing they tell me is, this isn't your fault, that's the end of the conversation.
Yep.
He tunes that out, and he didn't
even want to receive the Medal of Honor. He felt bad about receiving the Medal of Honor because of this. Yeah.
Yeah. I would encourage anyone to go hear that story. He's got a book, Courage Under Fire, I think is the name of the book.
Into the Fire, I think, is maybe
Into the Fire. That's right. Courage Under Fire is a movie, I think.
Yeah. His book is Into the Fire, if you're a reader.
Yes.
Yeah. If you don't, you can hear, he has his own podcast too, doesn't he? Does Dakota Meyer? It's Dakota, Dakota Meyer, Meyer.
Yeah.
And if you listen to Jocko Willink's podcast, it's number 115. I've got that one memorized because it's one of my favorite episodes. And it is set aside 3 hours. It is as intense of a story that you'll ever hear someone retell about war and about ownership.
It is flat out amazing.
It is.
But it gives you a little taste of that idea that Jocko has of extreme ownership, and to aspire to the level of that ownership that Dakota Meyer has, I think would kind of put into perspective some of the things, that we're talking about. There's definitely no excuses from Dakota Meyer, and there's no blaming. There's no complaining, definitely. And that's kind of the path that we want to get on, because not just for a baseball reason, not just from athletic purpose, but because that mentality, very easily propels you to success in life, so then that, as coaches, that's what we should aspire to be doing. I feel like maybe some would disagree with us on that I would have 20 years ago, I would say, but I think as I've kind of matured as a human being and as a parent, my perspective's definitely changed on that a little bit, and as a coach, in general, but we need to do better for our kids. We need to provide them better opportunity. We're stealing that away from them. We're stripping them of it, and that's rough, especially in the world that they're living in. It gets tougher every day, I feel like, and there's so much uncertainty, and there's so many reasons to just lay down and say, it's just too hard. I can't do it. Here's an excuse, and I'm going to blame this, and I'm going to point my finger at that and complain a little bit on the way. So, if we're going to do our best to prepare our kids for life, these are the types of concepts that we need to try to be thinking about, in addition to ground ball mechanics and pulling the inside pitch and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
it's all about keeping it in. You talk about keeping things in perspective and seeing the big picture. That's really what that has to be. What we're doing here when we're talking about being the kind of coach that is going to really help kids be successful, not just tomorrow in tomorrow's game, but in for the rest of their future. I mean, really, what it comes down to is what's more important. Like when we're coaching, we do have, whether we want to admit it or not, we have personal agendas, right? We have an agenda. Okay. I mean, because our egos are big and we want to win. We want to win instead of lose. And so there's a temptation to do things a certain way to win the game, to win today. Right. And I think what we have to remember is that, well, what is the big picture here? And it may not be that you would do the same thing in this scenario because of understanding the big picture that you would do in this same scenario just to win this game today, right? And so I'm not explaining this very well. Jocko Willink talks about this actually. Now we're on Jocko. I'm thinking Jocko, where he talks about and he talked about this in his in Extreme Ownership, the book, when personal agendas are more important than the team, and not just the team, but the overall mission of the team, right? So I think you can say this about kids individually too. When personal agendas are more important than those players and their lifelong, who they're going to be as people and their goals, then what happens is we don't even realize this, but actually, not only is the success of the mission compromised, the success of the team compromised, but performance really does suffer because you're not able to give them the most important things that they're going to need in the big picture for every day. What you're doing is you're doing whatever it takes to win today, and that's more of that's a small, narrow-minded, short-sighted view of leadership. It's a short-sighted view. It's like keeping the plates all spinning, right? Well, how about we have a vision for instead of you doing whatever it takes to keep all these plates spinning, let's have a vision for figuring out a way to get them to spin where it's permanently, where it's the whole idea of immediate gratification right now, instant gratification versus saving for the future. I mean, it's a whole same kind of concept, really.
Sure. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think there's different levels of ownership. This idea of ownership that we're talking about here. There's the, I would say the functional, the idea of ownership, which happens, within the game, and then the ownership that kind of happens beyond the game, and that's as coaches, we're coming from beyond the game into the game. That should be our mindset. That again, we're coaching people and not players,
right?
And incorporating these types of things into it is something that we have to own, and we have to, as coaches, focus on and dedicate and commit ourselves to. Absolutely. So. We probably need to think about it more, in general, as youth coaches, as high school coaches, as whatever it is that we are out there. And we're really, coach, this probably isn't a new concept to you. All of us are coaches in some ways, right?
That's right. Everybody is.
Somebody, everyone has that responsibility in some way of, bringing others along with it. And if you don't, you're probably not a very successful person. I would say that.
You're certainly not pausing to reflect on it. I mean, you're not considering the fact that it is true. I mean, it's happening. Somebody's looking at you for guidance. Somebody's looking at you. I mean, I guess unless you're just sitting around and literally doing nothing, heck, as soon as you have a child, you're a coach. As soon as you have a child. So, yeah.
I think it's funny too, because one of the things that we learned in this summer league that we kind of threw together in our area here, we had some coaches that's never really coached before, but they were willing to take on the role because they knew, one, it was the only way their kids were going to get to play this year, most likely, and two, the pressure was off because it was just, we're just getting the kids together and letting them play, to have fun. And, so it was easier for them to accept that because they didn't have to know a lot about baseball or softball. Right. But, you learn all you need to know about coaching once you commit to coach as you go along.
Yeah.
You really do. The real challenge of coaching is how you coach life, how you coach the person.
Yeah.
And that's the most important part too.
So
I say that just because you hear a lot of people say, I don't know enough about, this sport to coach, when, the sport really needs
good people to show up.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes that's all you got to do is show up and be there and be that influence that they need. And sometimes it's the best thing you can do. Just show up, say, here's the lineup.
Yeah.
Go out there and enjoy it, right?
And you would be surprised if a lot of coaches did that, because say someone did that in that environment, guess who's calling the pitches? The catcher is. Mm-hmm. Guess who's making the decisions on the base pass? The players are, right? All these ways that we do, use the word micromanage, all the ways that as coaches we micromanage our the game, those are stripped away in that environment, and our players are expected to do it. They might learn more.
Yep.
In that environment, with a person just saying, okay, go out and figure it out. Yeah. Than what they could sometimes with coaches that are overbearing and make all the decisions for them.
Yeah.
So that's there's a threshold there, I believe.
But yeah, I'll tell you something else, Pat, that I did this summer. I told the kids, I'm not going to give you any bunt signs.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean I don't want you to bunt. I just want you to think about when might be a good situation for you to lay one down. And I've got this philosophy too. I don't want them to sacrifice an out. Even, you're lying, especially early in the game. I don't want them to sacrifice their out. And so I want, if you're going to bunt, you need to be smart enough to think about who's going to be the least likely player to charge and to defend this bunt. And you need to bunt it in that direction, because I want you to try to be safe. I want you to I want you to make it a difficult play, right?
Yeah.
We're not just laying down a sacrifice to get out, unless we need it, and in a certain situation of the game. And even then, I want kids to think about that. I said, so if you're not sure and you want to call timeout and come down and ask me, and I had that toward the end of the season, I had that happen a few times. Actually, I had one kid fall in love with bunting because he found out, one, he was having a hard time getting on base, swinging the bat. And I said, Jake, you're pretty fast. I said, if you laid one, just to get out of your funk, if you laid one down, I said his name, didn't I? Sorry. If you laid one down, like for example, runners on, if there's a runner on second, a lot of times those third basemen are not going to charge. So you lay one down the third baseline, you could probably be safe there. If you pushed a bunt past the pitcher, like towards second base on any given scenario, there's a good chance that you would beat that out. And so he started doing that. He did that. He had almost like every time up, he was trying to bunt now, because he was successful his first 3 times. He had 3 hits in a row. All of a sudden, no hits all season, 3 hits in a row from bunts. And he's like, oh, I love this. I love it. And it became one of those things where he learned a strategic part of the game. And then he even started overusing a little bit. So I was able to pull him back and say, okay, now what's happening is this defense knows that you're going to bunt coming. So you can't be robotic and predictable. You gotta play within those. You have to have a feel, right? Baseball's about having a feel. Base running's about having a feel for when's a good time to go, when's a good time not to go, and that feel is something that they're not going to get when we overcoach them. When you coach it out of them, and the feel creates the ownership as well.
Yeah. I said you lied, but you didn't give the sign in this case. But I do believe you orchestrated a bunt in a game that I saw you coaching in from your 3-hole hitter.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was another example of a guy who was hot as he was on fire the first 10 games. I think he went 11 games with a hit in every game, and in most of those games there was multiple hits. I mean, and then he had 6 games in a row where he just, it happens. He couldn't hit anything. He
Absolutely,
was swinging through balls. He was popping everything up, and he was asking me, of course, about his mechanics and things. And I said, look, just keep your approach the same. Hitting is usually just a timing issue. The pitcher's out guessing. He's beating you. And he saw a situation. This was one of those examples where he saw a situation where the probably the most successful, the least likely thing that the defense was expecting him to do was going to be the most successful opportunity. And also, it was runners on first and third, so there's a lot of stuff going on in that situation too. He's a 3-hole hitter. I mean, it's like no one's expecting it, and he laid it down.
So he made that decision on his own, or did you
made
tell
it
him?
completely on his own.
Oh, I
Yeah.
apologize.
No,
I apologize.
I think it's possible that Coach Hewitt planted a seed in his mind. My assistant coach planted a seed in his mind. You know, like it's like, hey, because I know, you know, Chris is always talking to players. He's such a good assistant coach, and I think it's possible that because I could see him saying things like, hey, you know what? When I was in a bad slump, something that sometimes to get you out of it is just lay down a good bunt and beat it out, you know, and get you kind of fired up and all that. And I don't know. I don't know if that happened or not, but I can see that kind of thing happening. Or hopefully not. Hopefully it was just something that the player thought of on his own. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Well, I was giving you too much credit for that.
Definitely. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Definitely too much credit. Right.
Actually, during the game, I was giving you a little bit of heck.
Right. You say you never bunt. Well, I don't say I never bunt.
No. I
don't like sacrificing outs unless the situation is right to do so.
Sure. Yeah, and I would say
we need a run.
You know, there is a time to sacrifice an out for a run. Mm-hmm. I just feel like there's
definitely not in the first inning. Runner on first. Yeah. Well, the other thing that we find out. I mean, guess we're going down a tangent, but you can actually look at numbers now, probabilities, right? Of you know, a player scoring from first base with no outs is more likely than a player scoring from second base with one out, for example. Right. I think is one of those statistics.
You're actually decreasing the chances of the runner scoring by sacrificing him over to second or her over to second. Yeah. So that, you know, there you go. So why do you do it? Well, I don't know. That's why I don't.
Get him in scoring position.
Big Daddy.
He's already in scoring position. He's on base.
Exactly. Right. When the guy hits it over the fence, it's going to be 2 runs instead of 1.
There you go. There you go. Boy, we've hit some tangents on this one.
I own that.
That's right. That's right. You own that when he hits it over the fence, or are you on the defensive side calling the pitch?
Both.
Yeah, I own that. Right. I'll take that one. Good deal. Well, yeah, it's a good conversation.
Yeah, not bad. So we're on a roll. We'll see everyone next week.
Have a good one, everyone.